Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
It's me, Egbert, once again. I'm the new owner of this station. I went out and hired the best talk radio consultant, Jeff Allen from News Talk STL, and told him to hire the worst talent he could find. Jeff did exactly as I told him. Ladies and gentlemen, here are Brad and John.
Okay, John, yesterday was a big event in Jefferson City, and the reason I didn't know about this until after it happened, but I saw quite a few posts on Twitter, and our mutual friend, well, she's a good friend of yours, Stephanie Bell, who is a radio talk show host on the Eagle 93.9 in Columbia, Jeff City, also a very accomplished attorney. The abortion, what was the thing yesterday they had in Jefferson City?
Well, they had a March for Life yesterday in Jeff City.
Right, that was the March for Life.
And also we should note, too, that tomorrow the pro-choice people are celebrating the fact they say they have more than enough signatures to be on the ballot. And they're having a big to-do in Jeff City about that. But, yeah, there was I think it was the Mid-Missouri March for Life. I have a link up to it today on my website, Brad. Let me it was the Midwest March for Life is what it was.
Right, okay. Yesterday also, because it's May 1st, and by the way, you know what I didn't get to do? This is something I've done for years and years and years. Man,
celebrate May Day.
Well, me being a former pilot, to come on the air and go, Mayday, 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 but I didn't do it yesterday, so excuse me. Okay, yesterday was the day when the new super-duper regulations in Florida go into effect, and abortion restrictions. And I don't want to necessarily state what they were, because if Mary Elizabeth Coleman would hear, she would tell me that I got it wrong and she would correct me.
And you would love every moment.
Which she did one time before about the Texas thing. But essentially the restrictions have gotten very, very, very strict, where you can't, what is it? I think 6 weeks. Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Okay. Our president, I heard a soundbite of his saying that he thought it was a terrible thing to happen. And he essentially said in so many words, this is a decision between the mother and her doctor, and the government should not be involved. And I'm thinking to myself, let's take abortion out of the issue, and let's take so many other things nowadays, and let's have our president say, we don't think the government should be involved, but yet they're involved in everything. You know?
Yeah, and not to derail us here, Brad, but it ties in nicely of, wasn't this the same administration that supported vaccine mandates?
Well, see.
So when you start making the argument that the government should not be involved in health decisions, you got to be pretty consistent about it. And if the point of government is to defend people's lives and to defend human life, I guess some people don't believe that. But, come on, you know?
Well, this is where the libertarian in me comes out loud and proud, because of the fact that on one hand, and let's look at the abortion thing, and I know that it's just like there's no winning on that. I remember years ago, Jim White, when I was a young guy, I used to listen to Jim White, and there were certain topics that were off limits on his talk show, and one of them was, at the time, busing. And the reason he said that was off limits, because the people who were pro-busing, there's no way you're going to ever convert them, and the people who are anti-busing, there's no way you're going to be able to convert them. No matter what you say, people have their beliefs, and that's the abortion issue. If you're either for abortion or against abortion, there are very few people who are in the middle of that argument saying, well, I don't know, you know.
Correct. And I agree.
And at the risk of, essentially stepping into that whole mess, the thing that bothers me is that there are so many things that the government has taken control, the federal government has taken control of, which, quite honestly, I think they have no business in. And there's so many things going on with our cars and environmental protection. There was a guy that Mark Reardon had on the other day, and it's, I will tell you, a weird, funny, strange, I can't believe this happened to me, of all places, in Mobile, Alabama. I'm driving to see my son, This is on Christmas Eve. This is my usual trip. I go down on Christmas Eve. I drive from St. Louis down to Pensacola, Florida on Christmas Eve. And I always go through Mobile, Alabama on the way I go down there. And I go to the big war memorial they have down there, where they actually have, it's actually the Gulf of Mexico is right there. They have the big Alabama destroyer there, and they have some planes and things like that. So what they call the gate guard. You know what a gate guard is?
Somebody at the front to let you in or out.
Well, no, the gate guard, that could be a physical person, but the gate guard is typically like if you go out to Lambert, there are a couple of gate guards out there.
I get it. Yeah. To keep you from going in.
No, it's a decommissioned plane or something like that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
They call it a gate guard, and it's a decommissioned plane, and in this case, they have a decommissioned F-4 that sits up on a pedestal, and the F-4 was made right here in St. Louis, up on the north side of the airport in the old days, McDonnell, okay? So I always would pull off the Interstate 10, go into the things like my usual little ritual, go in and I'd get out of my car and I'd take some pictures and stuff like that. And I pulled in next to a family. There was a guy and a gal and a couple kids, and they're out stretching and looking at the planes and stuff like that. And I noticed he had Missouri license plates. And I said to him, "Hey, you from Missouri?" "Yeah, I'm from Missouri." And I go, told him where I was from, the whole bit. And the guy recognized who I was. It was sort of a bizarre, strange situation, is that he knew when I said to him, he told me where he lived, and he lived in Franklin County. And I go, "Oh, I've got business in Washington." And he says, "What is it?" I go, "I'm on a radio station." "Oh, I know who you are." Well, anyway, long story made short, turns out he works at Ameren UE, and he works at the Labadie power plant out there. And
oh, wow. Boy, they've been in the news lately,
well,
huh?
We got talking about various things, and he talked about the fact that when it gets cold, they get all these complaint calls because people are calling and saying, "I can't believe you're polluting the sky so badly." And the interesting thing is, guess what? It's not pollution, it's steam.
Absolutely. It is. But people see it and they think it's a smokestack.
Right. Because they have so dialed back the emissions through the scrubbers and all this kind of stuff in the smokestacks that there's very, 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 very little pollution coming out of those smokestacks. And this guy on Mark Reardon's show, I think it was Tuesday, he said this exact thing. Now, his thing, he's some lobbyist for some group that's saying that, we're going to run out of power, which we are, and we already had a grid system which is in bad shape, which it is, and we already have certain areas of the country which are already stressed as far as the amount of electricity, which it is, but yet...
So was this a nuclear guy, or who was this guy?
He was essentially saying that, look, we need to dial all these goofy regulations back because of the fact that you can't build this kind of power plant, you can't build that power plant. And the interesting thing he said was, he gave a really interesting statistic. Hold on, I got to clear my voice here. Okay, the statistic he said was your typical, and he said this is like a typical coal-fired plant produces 850 megawatts of power, okay, which means 850,000 watts of power. That's what it produces, okay? And he said typically your 850 megawatt coal power plant has a footprint of between 10 and 20 acres. Okay, so in other words, think about that for a minute. You got the places where they burn the coal, you got the big generators, you got the transmission equipment, the electricity comes out, and bang. So in other words, think of like 10 to 20 acres. There's the footprint. And he said that if you were to put in a comparable solar field that would produce 850 megawatts, it's 5,000 acres. And I'm going, whoa, 5,000 acres. And the point he was making was, and there are videos all over. My weather thing kicks in, and my meteorological training, very limited from Mississippi State, kicks in. And there's tons of videos over the last few days of these tornadoes going through Nebraska and Kansas and Iowa. It's just crazy stuff. He said, think about what a tornado would do to a large solar plant, and think about what a tornado would do to a coal-fired plant. He says chances are the coal-fired plant would have little or no damage, and a tornado going through a 5,000 acre solar plant would be devastating. And I'm thinking to myself, I never thought of that.
Yeah, and Brad, also too, here's a fun fact: the average size of a average farm. So if in the United States, so if you're driving through Franklin County or St. Charles County, the average farm is less than 500 acres.
Yes. And
so think about that.
5,000.
Imagine if a bunch of farmers got together and said, you know what, as farmers, we're just going to stop growing corn and soybeans, and we're going to dedicate ourselves to solar. How many farms it would take to make a difference in replacing one coal-powered energy plant?
Okay, I'm no solar expert, but I do have not one but two solar systems. I have one of them that does that powers some security lights, and it's not one of those little dinky things that's got a little solar panel on top. It is a true solar thing with panels and with a charge controller and a battery and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's several batteries. Okay, my thing, and I still make fun of this, and this is John's territory because it's corporate window dressing. Ameren UE built a solar plant on T.R. Hughes Boulevard on the north side of Tom Geneva. If you jump on T.R. Hughes, if you get off there at Highway 70, you're going north in T.R. Hughes. You cross over Tom Geneva right where the ballpark is, and as you continue on T.R. Hughes Boulevard, it makes a sweeping right curve to the right, and then ultimately it dead ends at Highway 79. Okay, right there, about midway between Tom Geneva and Highway 79, Ameren UE put in a solar field. Okay, I have said all along, window dressing, because it's not a big, very, very big solar field. I would say my guess would be it could maybe run 20, 30 homes. Now, think about that. In that area, there's 20 or 30 homes that are right down the block from that.
And that's subdivision. Yeah, but you know the great thing about, so to your point, Brad, you have it on major thoroughfare where everybody sees it, talks about it. When you have legislators in, when you have officials in, you can get them there easily. You can give them a tour of it. It's perfect for Ameren.
Right, because it's window dressing. It's like,
yeah, of course. It's like it's what this will be the second time we quote Rush Limbaugh today, Brad. It's symbolism over substance.
Well, God, isn't that everything nowadays? Just about.
It really is.
I mean,
and you know, by the way, real quick on solar stuff. Do you know what has in the last 12 months or so really oppressed and crushed the solar industry, Brad?
I know the answer to this.
I'm ready.
It's the Gomez lady. What's her name again?
Valentina. Yeah, she's been using a blowtorch and a flamethrower, and the increased heat undermines the need for solar power. No, the idea of increased interest rates. So if you're on the margin and you thought, well, you know, I'll get some solar panels, or you thought, hey, I'm going to start this business and we're going to invest in solar panels, you got to finance those solar panels for your house or for your investment. And maybe you would do it when interest rates were lower, right? But when interest rates are a little higher, you're going to think twice about getting those solar panels, Brad.
Well, see, once again, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse with this whole electric car thing. But the interesting thing was just last week, and you know this because you follow the stock market very closely, Tesla's not – hold on a minute. Falling apart now. I got a cough, got a bad eye, the whole bit. Okay, Tesla stock. John, what's Tesla stock done the last month?
In 1 month, it's up 8%. But Brad, it's off the lows. So in the last 6 months, it's down 18%.
Okay.
So it has bounced off the lows in the last month. But, you know, we call that, Brad, a dead cat bounce. If you drop a cat from a roof,
right,
the cat's going to bounce.
Right. Okay. Not very much, but it's going to bounce a little bit.
Not very much. But yeah, and by the way, over the last year or year to date, Tesla is down. If you bought Tesla on January 1st, it's down 28% this year, Brad.
The reason for that is they're getting tremendous competition. I heard something the other day. They talked about that in 5 years ago, there were no Chinese solar cars in Europe. Now, 8% of the vehicles sold in Europe are Chinese solar cars, are Chinese electric cars. And the reason Tesla's not doing well is because of the fact that the market is sort of saturated. A lot of people are saying, I don't know if I necessarily want an electric car because there's been a lot of negative things come out about electric cars. Ford has just been pummeled with their losses on the F-150 Lightning, which is the electric F-150, and also the Mach-E, which the dealers can't sell. Ford admitted Chris Farley's uncle, or Chris Farley's cousin, who is the head of, every time I see him, I think of Chris Farley, which, and he's come out and said that on the F-150 Lightning, they lose $40,000 to $50,000 per vehicle. Now think about that for a minute. If you're selling the vehicle for $70,000 or $80,000 and it costs you $120,000 to produce, how long are you going to stay in business with that model, John?
Not long. As the Gen Z says, the math isn't mathing.
Right, the math isn't mathing. And what's interesting is now what everybody's taking a look at is hybrids again. Matter of fact, Ford's...
Yeah, that's coming back to that way.
Right, but the problem is the federal government says, no, we don't want hybrids. We want zero-emission vehicles, which means no tailpipe, even if it was a small little 1 or 2 or 3-cylinder engine, which essentially would charge. That's essentially what the hybrid is. When the battery pack becomes depleted, it switches over to the engine. Matter of fact, on the original Chevy Volts, that was the way it worked. That the car ran off the batteries all the time, but when the battery became depleted, the engine came up, and it wasn't necessarily tied into the drivetrain. It was just like a charger. It was, in other words, it was like an onboard charging system. And the problem is everybody's going like, no, let me think about this for a minute. I don't think I want an EV, and meaning electrified vehicle. And once again,
but Brad, listen again. It goes back to the idea of if you're a climate change person, you say yes, Brad. But that's why it's ever the more important for government to put these mandates in place, because without these mandates, corporations aren't going to act to battle climate change, Brad.
Okay.
And you know what, Brad? On our first 90-degree day, I'm going to remind you that you consistently stand in the way of carbon neutral and pro-climate mandates, like a simple EV mandate, Brad. Who does it hurt, Brad? I think car companies should have to lose $50,000 for every car they produce, Brad.
Okay, let me bring this topic full circle. Not this break, but the break before. I criticized Joe Biden because he essentially said that the government should not get in the way of women and their choice. Okay, so why does the government get in the choice of you and I, what kind of vehicle we have? Why is it...
It's called climate change, Brad. Open your eyes. Wait, I sounded like Shelley there. Remember when Shelley would say things like that to you on the BS show?
Right. Well, why is it that he's, on one hand, he says the government should not get in the way of a woman and her choice, but on the other hand, the government is freely getting in the way of your choice of what car you want. To me, if he's saying the government should not get involved in a choice of life or death, I would say, well, then everything else is trivial after that. You know what I'm saying? To the point where what kind of car you want, who cares? The government should have been saying that. If you want to drive a diesel truck with dual stacks with black smoke coming out of it, that's okay, right?
Well, we're over time, Brad, but I would just point out that the carbon in soil is more important than a human life in a mother's womb. I think we can all agree on that.
John, here's what you didn't hear was, if you heard a little click, that was John pulling the pin on the grenade.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? We heard Jim White rolling over in his grave. Is he still with us, or has he bit the big one?
Oh, no, he's been dead for, unfortunately, quite some time.
Okay. Rest in peace, Jim
I think
White.
He's been gone like 20 years.
But you're still here,
years.
Brad.
Yeah.
Even though you only have one eye and your dead-eye dick and your shotgun Willie, one-eyed Willie sits around in his underwear, you're still with us, Brad.
And you do not know how many times I do the show in my underwear, but that's a whole nother story. Okay, say goodbye, John.
See you guys tomorrow.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?